Everyone who has played a wrestling game knows that the roster is always a big deal. And so, before every WWE game release, we can't wait to see what the roster will include. Having played just about every WWE wrestling game, I'm going to predict what characters will go into WWE 2k22 and how likely they'll join. Before we get into that roster, let's look at how much room there probably is for new characters. 2K20 had a roster of 266 wrestlers. This includes duplicates and DLC characters, and after the releases of the last 2 years, 137 of those 266 are still on the roster, meaning we have a gain of 129 roster spots. However, we also have to deal with, unfortunately, duplicates. 2K20 had 71 duplicates. 40 of them were those awful DLC characters. Those DLCs were an attempt at something new, they tried, it failed, but 129 slots minus the 40 to 71 duplicates means we have a range of 58 to 98 roster slots to fill. And you might think, new developer, new engine, no way they'll add that many characters to the game, and you're probably right. But this roster size is not completely far-fetched, and with the release delay, the mocap creators might be able to get a chunk of new wrestlers in. Who knows? In total, I got a list of 85 wrestlers in WWE at the time of recording who are not in 2K20, with some wrestlers who are very likely to be in 2K22 and lots who likely won't be in 2K22. We are going from brand to brand, starting with the least likely to the most likely, rated out of 10. So let's get to them. Kicking off with Raw, we got 4 people scoring a 2 out of 10 on the likely being in 2K22 scale. These are Riddick Moss, Shanky, Fear, and Reggie. All of them are on Raw. None of them are doing anything in particular, nothing spectacular, so they just get a 2 out of 10 for very simple reasons. Riddick Moss has been with WWE for well over a year. Fear and Shanky are on TV quite often, being Jinder Mahal's lackeys, and Reggie has been in multiple programs, even though it's been mostly a valet and not a wrestler. Scoring slightly higher is Omos. He's getting a 4 out of 10, simply because he's a champion. He doesn't wrestle a lot, hasn't been around that long, and it's just going to be hard to get a moveset together for him. Adding Omos to a DLC package further down the line is going to be more likely in my opinion. In fact, I would say Omos has an 8 out of 10 chance to get in the DLC package and just a 4 out of 10 to make it on release. Doudrop is getting a 6 out of 10, wrestling as Piper Niven on the NXT UK. There's a decent amount of footage to work with. However, Piper Niven as Doudrop hasn't been stateside for a very long time and is still finding footing outside the UK wrestling scene, so scoring a decent 6 out of 10. Mace, Mansoor, and T-Bar are getting 7 out of 10s. Mace and T-Bar are with WWE for a few years now, wrestling in NXT first, and they are on Raw for well over a year. Mansoor has good history with NXT, 205 Live, and is a go-to for the Saudi Arabia shows. So all of them quite likely to be added to 2K22, at least in my opinion. Angel Garza, Karrion Kross, and MVP are scoring a nice 8 out of 10. Garza has wrestled at WrestleMania and has been on Raw for well over a year. MVP returned at the Rumble in 2020 and has been a key figure on Raw, if not in a more managerial role. And Kross, in his short run with WWE, has been a key figure to NXT and a weird addition to Raw over the last few months. However, he seems to be getting some sort of a weird push. Anyway, these 3 names do definitely matter. And the last 2 for Raw are John Morrison and Damian Priest. These 2 I'm absolutely certain will make the roster, so I'm giving them a 10 out of 10 likeliness to be in the game. Priest has been pushed for the past year and a half on Raw and has been great on NXT. John Morrison is a returning veteran. These 2 guys I'd bet money on joining the 2K22 roster. Second brand, Smackdown. Getting a 3 out of 10 is Commander Aziz, who has had various roles over the years, fighting in the Greatest Royal Rumble, being Dabba-Kato on Raw Underground, and now being Apollo Crews' lackey. Aziz doesn't wrestle much, but he's been around, therefore getting a 3 out of 10. Rick Books, Tegan Knox, and Dominic Mysterio, 7 out of 10s. Books and Tegan have been with WWE since before the pandemic era, even if they haven't wrestled a lot. Whether due to creative limbo or injuries, these two are getting more and more matches and are being valued members of the roster. Dominic Mysterio, in the meantime, is a new wrestler. Has been featured a lot during his run. He's just very green, but I can see these three being added to 2K22. And finally, for Smackdown, we have Shotzi with an 8 out of 10. Ranking slightly higher, also dating back pre-pandemic, Shotzi has been around for all this time, having feud after feud on NXT before being called up, therefore pretty good chance of being added to the roster. And next up, we are going to move into NXT, which is going to be quite interesting, as we are going to start off with people with a 0 out of 10. Those are Joe Gacy, Josh Briggs, and Trey Baxter. And the fact that they are on the list is quite simple. They solely made the list because they have a very, very small chance of being added in a Future Stars DLC pack. So while for the release version of the game they get a 0 out of 10, for a DLC pack they would get a 2 out of 10. Very far-fetched, I know, but that's it. Next up we have Odyssey Jones, who is kind of in a similar boat as the three we just mentioned. However, seems like he's already on his way to get a build. So if out of all the new recruits we've seen releasing during the breakout tournament, Odyssey Jones has a slightly bigger edge of being added to the game, therefore getting a 1 out of 10. He does have a bigger part of being included in a DLC pack, but overall his chances are very, very slim. Just a 1 out of 10. We have Sarov and Ikemanjiro on a 2 out of 10, simply because they've been around in NXT for a while. They haven't done anything of note, so the chances of joining the roster is very unlikely, but not exactly impossible. We have Boa and Jessica Mea with a 4 out of 10, simply because these are not big names, but they are involved in building factions, which does increase their odds. Boa and Jesse aren't exactly in-ring regulars, but you see them on NXT rather often being backed up by the faction or backing up by the faction members during segments. Next up, we're going to get a big list with 6 out of 10 people. These are Frankie Monet, Joaquin Wilde, Raul Mendoza, Sarai, Zoe Starks, and Carmelo Hayes. Monet, Sarai, and Starks have been on NXT for just a few months, but they've made an impact since joining. Wilde and Mendoza have been around, not in the biggest feuds, mostly just playing henchmen to Santos Escobar. But that faction is strong enough to get them added to the game, at least in my opinion. Carmelo Hayes is really new, but he did win the breakout tournament, and seems to be getting a push towards becoming at least a threat, a credible threat, to whichever champion he's gonna face being the breakout tournament winner. That means he'll probably be kind of part of the backbone of the NXT roster, giving him some quite good odds of being added into the game in later stages of development. Next list is even bigger, and we're gonna do it in 2 parts. These are 7 out of 10s, but they kind of have different reasons to it. First off, we have Aaliyah, Ashanti Theodonis, Indy Hartwell, Casey Catanzaro, and Caden Carter. All 5 of these have been around NXT for a little while, being featured quite regularly. Adonis is with Hit Row, Aaliyah with the Robert Stone brand, Mea and Monet. Hardwell is with The Way, and Carter and Catanzaro are kind of the backbone of the women's tag division in NXT. All of them are in decent spots on the brand, giving them 7 out of 10. Also getting 7 out of 10s are Nash Carter and Wesley, who are dominating the tag division as its current champions. We have Fabian Eichner and Marcel Bartel, who as Imperium have been a staple of NXT and NXT UK for years. Also stateside for well over a year at this point. And we have Xia Li, who has been repackaged with a whole new faction and has also been with NXT for quite some time. We got LA Knight, who debuted early on in the CWC era and has been in consistent feuds recently fighting for the NXT title. And finally, in the 7 out of 10 pool is Ridge Holland, who seemed to have been Hunter's favorite in NXT UK, quickly brought to NXT US, and has been booked strongly since returning from his injury. Getting a step higher, we go to the 8 out of 10 chances, starting off with Danny Burch. Getting him in would simply complete the tag team with Oni Lorcan, who has been in 2K20. Burch has been with NXT and 205 Live for years, and his time is due. Austin Theory, Timothy Thatcher, and the grizzled young veterans get an 8 out of 10 as well, all for being very present on NXT, with Gibson and Drake having a good history in NXT UK as well. Thatcher is a former tag champ, has had great feuds, and Austin Theory was at WrestleMania, teaming up with Angel Garza. These are all sensible additions, in my opinion, towards the roster. Cameron Grimes, Santos Escobar, and Dexter Lumis are on the 8 out of 10 as well, with these three being all over NXT in various feuds and stories. If these three don't somehow make the release version, I'd be certain they'd be in a DLC pack. Just to stress that, if Cameron Grimes, Santos Escobar, and Dexter Lumis are not in the release version, they are definitely in the DLC pack. Drake Maverick is on the 9 out of 10, simply being in the Cruiserweight title tournament, part of a tag team with the now released Killian Dane. I can see Maverick making the cut. He technically was in 2K20 as well, as a manager. Now, however, I see the former Rockstar making it into the game as a wrestler. Then, the 3 NXT stars who I'm certain of will make the game, therefore being 10 out of 10. These are Kushida, the current Cruiserweight champion, Isaiah Swerve Scott, the current North American champion, and Raquel Gonzalez, the current NXT Women's champion. Besides being champions, these three are pretty much the soul of NXT. Spending years on the brand, build like potential stars, not having either of them in, you might as well not include NXT at all. Next up, we got NXT UK, and to kick things off are 9 of NXT UK's finest. A-Kid, Danny Luna, Iofi Valkyrie, Isla Dawn, Ginny, Joseph Connors, Kenny Williams, and the current tag champs Lewis Howley and Sam Stoker of the Pretty Deadly. All of them get a 3 out of 10, for the simple reason that they are the more known members of the NXT UK roster. If NXT UK needs a bigger presence in the game, a few of them could make the game, similar to Noam Dar and Mark Andrews in 2K20. None of them are over enough to convincingly make the cut. Getting a 4 out of 10 is Maiko Satomura, the current NXT UK Women's Champion. Maiko hasn't been with NXT UK for a long while, but since she's champion, she might get priority on getting put into the game. Still, I won't give her high odds. Eddie Dennis, Flash Morgan Webster, and the Gallus members Mark Coffey and Wolfgang get a 5 out of 10. For the simple reason, they've been in NXT UK since pretty much the beginning, and are vital members to the NXT UK roster. Joe Coffey, the other Gallus member, gets a 6 out of 10, simply for being in more NXT UK title feuds than anyone else on the UK roster, except for former champions. Jordan Devlin gets a 7 out of 10, as Devlin is a former Cruiserweight champion, and has been towards the state on a few occasions, including the time he went to NXT to unify the Cruiserweight title in a match with Santos Escobar. And it wouldn't surprise me to find out that's exactly when Devlin went to 2K Studios to get mocapped. Ilya Dragunov, our current NXT UK champion, gets a 8 out of 10. Also thinking mocapped while being in the US. After all, he was there for a couple of weeks, cutting promos before his takeover title match. And it would have been a shame not to take advantage of that. Getting a 10 out of 10 is Walter. Which is bold, I know. But Walter, besides going to the States to lose the belt to Ilya Dragunov, was also appearing the week prior to his loss for the promos. Walter was also in the States to have the out-of-the-blue feud with Tommaso Ciampa. And I'm guessing that was the exact moment 2K tried to tie him down to the game as well. After all, it's commonly known Walter is not the biggest fan of traveling, might as well get a potential royalty check in the form of a video game appearance, right? Next up, a few of the breakout tournament guys and the NXT 2.0 recruits, or the young bloods as we can call them. Brooks Jensen and Tony D'Angelo get a 0 out of 10, similar to Gacy and Briggs on the NXT list. They definitely will not make the release version, but provided they stick around and get pushed on NXT rather than the Performance Center, they could have a 2 out of 10 chance being included in a DLC package. Gable Stevenson is a different story. The Olympic hero will definitely not make the release version, but if a Future Stars pack were to be released, I'd give him an 8 out of 10 to be in that pack, as he's rumored to be the next big Vince project. Trick Williams get a base 2 out of 10. As stated before, Carmelo Hayes seems to have a bright future on NXT, which is the only reason his new buddy Trick doesn't get a 0 out of 10. I do find it more likely he'll be DLC instead of being in the release version, but that's only if he becomes more than a manager type to Carmelo Hayes. Hachiman and Ivy Nile are part of Diamond Mine. The faction seems to have good promise, which is why they get a whopping 3 out of 10, as they have done nothing in NXT so far. It would be purely on a stable name alone. Looking at Diamond Mine, Julius and Brutus Creed seem to be Vince's new boys in NXT 2.0, already gathering dominant victories as a tag team and having both a manager in Malcolm Bivens and a more established star for NXT in Roderick Strong ups their value, meaning they get a solid 6 out of 10 as they are very new and time will be of the essence. Braun Breaker, in the meantime, seems to be a more polished star in his own right, a name to keep our eyes on. And if any of the new recruits is going to make it into the game, Breaker would be definitely first in line to get capped and scanned without a doubt. But only a 7 out of 10 because again, time is of the essence. Now if you've been counting, that would make 84 names. And I wouldn't be part of Smackdown, NXT, or Raw, but rather the Alumni section. And that name is Wade Barrett. Barrett made his return to the company in 2020, becoming color commentator on NXT. And since he's back with the company, and since he's got solid runs as Intercontinental Champion, I give Barrett a 9 out of 10 to enter the Alumni section of WWE2k22.